Welcome back to Questing Beast. I am Ben. Today we're taking a look at Beyond the Pale. This is an adventure published by Lost Pages and written by Heigert. Look at our back cover here. This is an old school adventure in a place both real and imagined. In the village of Kest, the days of remembrance are near. But now a great cataclysm is approaching, ready to wash everything away. Can you uncover the town's secret before it's too late? Designed for Karen, but mostly system neutral and easily adaptable to other RPGs. So for example, you could run it using my system, Knave 2nd Edition. As usual with Lost Pages products, it is very nicely produced. It has this great cloth cover, kind of a minimalistic look to it. It's got a cloth ribbon down here at the bottom. It's all stitch bound. Very nice paper quality too. It feels really good in your hand. Here's a map of the region that we're going to be exploring. We have the village of Kest right here, the Blue Forest, lots of different locations there. And you can get all the way over to the west coast where you have the First Light Lighthouse and we have some ruins. There's actually two different dungeon areas that you can explore, one of which is in the ruins and one of which is hidden underneath the village. So the summary of this adventure is that it takes place in an isolated wilderness region with a single settlement, Kest. The PCs are likely to visitors, although they might be related to a local. And the events take place during a week-long celebration, during which the PCs will need to gather information, solve mysteries, and overcome threats to prevent a great cataclysm. The setting in the book is based on an actual territory in the western parts of the Russian Empire called the Pale of Settlement. For over a century, the Jewish people were restricted to this region. During the same time, hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed in anti-Jewish attacks. Even with these restrictions, Jews in Europe were able to cultivate a rich culture and language. Together, they formed tight-knit market towns called shuttles. The currency used in this setting is called the groschen. The whole adventure very much revolves around a lot of Jewish folklore, and there's a lot of unusual terms you may not have heard of, and so the side notes over here are really useful in figuring that stuff out. For example, a mazik is an evil spirit determined to cause mischief and mayhem. Here we have a timeline of things that are going on 2 days before the PCs arrive, and then these 4 days afterwards. Basically what's going on in the town is that there are a bunch of intruders in the town from a local company who want to use the town as a base of operations for some business ventures, and some people in the town are not happy about this. The rabbi has created a golem underneath the town in this sort of secret dungeon-esque area. In the process of doing so, however, he has accidentally opened up a portal to the Yene Welt, which is a place of spirits, fiends, and souls, may refer to the afterlife or the world to come. And a bunch of things have started to leak through into the real world. For example, a Dybbuk has gotten through, and it's now causing havoc. It's jumping from person to person, possessing people and causing murders, as well as another beast called the Aluka. Over the course of the next 4 days, other beings will be drawn to this area, like the Karish tigress. This being up here, the Aluka, wants to implant its spawn into a pregnant woman and cause its spawn to start repopulating the area and causing havoc everywhere. This being is very much opposed to that and is willing to wipe out the town and the entire surrounding area to prevent that from happening. So there is this catastrophe looming on the horizon if the players don't stop it. There's quite a few things to keep track of in this adventure. For example, the Dybbuk itself is moving from person to person and location to location, and so there is a chart of where it happens to be at any given time as the players investigate. And there's a number of adventure hooks you could start out with here. Like, for example, a mysterious group of scholars called the Council have asked the PCs to acquire the Book of the Night Wanderer, which is a cool artifact we'll see later on. Believed to be in the possession of the rabbi, the pay is 3,000 groschen upon the book's successful recovery. Before we continue though, this video is sponsored by the Questing Beast newsletter, which is my summary of the best news and reviews and theory and advice from all over the RPG internet. It gets sent directly to the email inbox of tens of thousands of RPG fans every single month, and I think you will really enjoy it too. I'll put a link to it down in the description below if you want to check it out. The next section is all of the characters that we're going to run into, mostly in the town, and there are 16 of these. I think the illustrations and the descriptions are really great. For example, let's look at this guy right here. Blackbeard turning to gray, a rail-thin body bent from reading, speaks softly but is highly paranoid, deeply hurt by his brother's embrace of secularism. Now, over here we have some bullet points, but if there is a circular bullet point, that means it's something that is pretty obvious and easy to tell. And if it's one of these symbols, then it's a secret that you're going to have to uncover through investigation. So for example, an obvious thing is that he irritates the less pious with early morning calls to prayers and over-proselytizing. Meanwhile, a secret thing is that he knows the weaknesses of beasts and spirits alike, and that he believes that the Dybbuk is still trapped beneath the shoal in the Tree of Life, although it has actually escaped and he's just not aware of it. And he wants to return to the Tree of Life to close the gate. That's the area underneath the town. Many of the characters have relationships with other ones. For example, Rivka, hard but beautiful, very sharp with cunning eyes, manages the ritual baths, pregnant and starting to show. She has only told Ida after seeking her counsel. and keeps her relationship with Frank a secret, but plans on leaving Kest to elope. Now, while I like a lot of these characters, and I think the descriptions are really good, they seem like vivid characters that are embedded in their setting, the problem is that there are 16 of them. And that is a lot of characters to keep track of, especially when they all know different things and they all have different relationships with each other and so forth. This is a situation where I would really like to have a relationship map or a graph of some kind where you have all the characters on one page and you can see all of the different connections between them. If I was going to run this adventure myself, that's something that I would be very tempted to create for myself just to make things easier to run. And I would have liked to see something like that in the book. Most of the characters that we are going to meet are humans, but some of them are ghosts or other types of beings. For example, Xena the Estri, which is a vampiric creature that can appear as a human woman or as an owl. She's not necessarily a bad person, she just needs to drink blood. As you travel through this region, it says to roll a d6 whenever the PC is moved to a new location, so it's really designed to be more of a point crawl, I think. Here's a map of the town itself. It's not something that you're going to need to know a lot of details about, probably. It's mostly more of a point crawl, like I said, where once you know the major locations, you can just move to and from them, talk to the people there, and try and investigate the situation. Each of the different buildings has its own write-up over here, again using the same format where there's obvious things and there's hidden things. And if the hidden thing is kind of indented underneath it, it means you'd have to investigate there in order to find more about it. I really like that format. It's really nice. By and large, I think the descriptions are very well done. They're pretty terse and to the point. There's not a lot of in-depth description of many of the locations. And for the most part, that works just fine. There are some areas later on, which I'll point out to when we get to them, where I think more information would be useful, where the terseness of the descriptions, I think sometimes leaves out information that a game master would want to know, or just more information to help visualize what's actually going on there. There were some parts where I couldn't really picture what exactly I was looking at. What is the real layout of this location? There's plenty of really good magic items, though, that you could easily steal for any RPG. For example, I got an ink mirror here. Poured the entire bottle into cupped hands to eavesdrop on any conversation that mentions the name of anyone reflected in the ink. For the next month, shadows scatter near the user and echoes die. So there's often like a weird little after effect or trade-off, which I think is really nice for a magic item. And the fact that it is a ink mirror means you're pouring ink on your hands, so your hands will be stained with ink for probably a long time. So people might know that you've used it. There's plenty of little things to find. For example, if you investigate the Giving Hospital, you might find that there are sacks, but they're packed with dirt, dried clay, and pieces of small broken golems. So that's a clue that someone has been trying to build a golem here. And if you investigate even further, you can find that there is a secret tunnel underneath the Giving Hospital over to the Shoal, which is near where the Tree of Life, this underground dungeon, has been created, and that's where the golem is. Anytime you go into a location, it always tells you who is there and what times they're there, because there isn't actually a system in this for tracking like what the time of day. Maybe there is in the actual Karen system. I'm not sure because I haven't read that system. But I would recommend that you actually do that, because that way you will have a better sense of how much time is passing and who is going to be where at what times, which is relevant. Here's a typical monster that you might run into, the Vorstel Witch, vaguely humanoid, but wears the face of a rotted tree stump. Carnivorous, she wiggles her tiny fronds into the air as a lure, a subterranean tunneler of great skill. So the stats here are for Karen, so you got hit points, strength, dex, and will. I like how there's information here about what the creatures want, so there's different ways to interact with them besides just trying to clobber them. Wishes to exchange rare minerals for a fresh corpse, easily takes offense, especially if offered anything more than a few days dead. If it deals critical damage to you, you are pulled underground where you soon suffocate. One thing I did notice is that there's several other creatures that don't seem to have stat blocks later on, although they're usually described as being very powerful, so that could just be that you're not supposed to fight them. This area is the Blue Forest with a number of locations like Xena's Nest, the Colony, the Grove of Tall Grass, and so forth. There is a secret path that connects all of these things called the Amaranth. It's a hidden trail that connects all the major points. Tree limbs and red flowers, see the butcher shop, act as markers that point the way at each junction. So if players are being very careful and are paying attention to their surroundings, they might notice that the flowers and tree limbs are kind of pointing off in one particular direction. And if they learn to follow that, they'll get much more quickly through the forest. Or at least they're not going to run into as many encounters. There isn't a whole lot of combat encounters in this adventure, at least less than I would typically see in a D&D-esque adventure. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's very investigation focused and there is a time limit. So players are still pressured to work quickly and figure out what's going on rather than just fighting everything they run into. For example, with the encounters over here, there's really only one thing that's even statted. Here's an example where I think more information might be needed. So we have a back garden right here. And in the back garden, you can find a body, Carl, torn to shreds, wearing overalls, face stricken with agony. And then up in the oak tree, there is a Shetken folk worker is hiding halfway up, nearly invisible in the branches. If the PCs appear friendly, it will gesture to communicate what it has seen. But it doesn't tell you what it has seen. Now, if you've read the whole book, you can figure that out. It's detailed in other places. But this is the place where it happened. This would be a great opportunity to recap what exactly went on here, so that'll be just a little bit easier for the game master to relay that information. I'm very much in favor of repeating information throughout a book multiple times wherever it might be relevant, just to speed things up. There are other times when there are secrets that are revealed, and I'm not totally sure what to make of them. For example, and this is Xena's nest. She's the vampire-like creature. And in the bed, hidden in the piles of feathers, is a dried foreskin, ew, wrapped in paper. It is very old. Right? That's a very strange and weird thing to find. What does that have to do with the story? How is that connected? Players are going to want to know. And frankly, I don't know. I could be that I missed it at some point in the book where I just missed where it was explained, but I'm not sure if I did. And if I was just trying to run this out of the book and the players asked more information or tried to ask Xena for more information about it, I don't know what I would say. If you're running a mystery, you don't want things to be mysterious for the game master. You want to spell everything out. Here's the Shetkin folk, which are human-shaped stick-like creatures that you can encounter. And there's plenty of good clues all throughout this adventure that are going to help you unwind what's really going on. So for example, if you talk to these people, they will let you know that the arrival of Karish Tigris, which we'll see in a second, portends a great cataclysm, which is really important for everyone to know because the players at the beginning of the adventure might not realize that this cataclysm is going to come during the festival, during the feast, near the end of the ticking clock. I think that's another thing that could be improved. Well, I think the ticking clock is good, and the fact that they're leading up to this big ceremony kind of tells the players that that's how much time that they have. The amount of danger that everyone is in is not really apparent until they do enough investigation. So their sense of urgency might not be high enough. Here is Karish Tigris itself, the many-faced, a giant hoofed beast with two heads, a black-horned deer and a black lion, effectively invincible, right? So there's no stats for it because what are you going to do to try and kill it? This is another great example of giving players good information because it says it answers questions truthfully as they have no desire or need for secrecy. So if you actually manage to find this guy, he can really info dump important clues and get you going to places that you need to be. You can go to the lighthouse and find some magic items like a soul candle, where burning the candle can free a human host of any spiritual possession, which is really useful because there is a number of creatures that can possess you. If you explore along the coast, you can find the cave of the Karob tree, and inside the cave, there is a tunnel leading to the ruins. However, that tunnel is guarded by a twin-bladed sword that's on fire and spinning and blocking the passage. Kind of an interesting reference to the Garden of Eden in Genesis. There's some nice clues built into the environment on how you're going to get past it using the Karob seed, because you can see a corpse that's been burnt by the flames, but the seed that he is holding is totally fine. So that's kind of your ticket for invincibility when it comes to these blades and getting past them. Now, you can get into the ruins over here, but the issue I had is that it says the complex is completely inaccessible from the cliffs above, buried in a landslide. We can have a picture over here where the whole thing is just covered in dirt and totally destroyed. But then it says the only route to the ruins is through the cave. The ruins appear ancient but not buried after traveling this way. So does that mean that there's like two different versions of these ruins? One where it's all ruined and destroyed, and the other one where it's still intact, and it kind of depends on what angle you go in through? It sounds that way, but it's sort of unclear. Like, what happens if you went in through this cave and then you went out another way into the normal world, where you suddenly look like an illusion behind you? How does that actually work out? It's not really spelled out. I really do like the way that the rooms are described here, especially the way that the different directions that you go, it gives you sensory clues as to what is in the next room, which is really great for navigation. So if you start here and you decide to go east, then you're going to hear goats bleating and a foul chemical odor. There's also some really great creatures you can encounter, like the Se'erim, goat-like Shaidim born from scapegoats that have absorbed the sins of a congregation through ritual, screaming aloud all the sins of Kest, see below, in an eerie chorus. That is a really great image. Or Azazel, who is the head of these guys, wears the chest of a man, wings and claws of a bird, head and horns of a ram, and tail of a lion. Knows the sins of every creature, living or dead, and the history of the ruins. He offers the PCs information in exchange for a tale of sin. The PCs can offer their own or those of another, so that's a really great role-playing opportunity. Some great magic items like this knife that never misses, but when you deal critical damage, the victim's greatest sin is burned into the attacker's memory, take 1 fatigue. But of course, that could also be a way for you to gain information. You stab the right person and deal critical damage, you learn something about them. And for people running games where you have gold pieces for experience points, never fear, there's plenty of treasure all throughout this adventure, although some of it is hidden in very interesting ways. So for example, in the sanctuary, you can find this table that is coin-shaped, which might be a clue. And I suppose if you try to lift it, it might be unusually heavy, because inside each of the wooden legs are hidden a gold rod, which is worth 500 each. And as before, there's a couple of places where the room descriptions were just a little bit confusing to me. For example, this room is called the Drain, and it would be right over here on the map. It says that there is ooze that is blocking the drain and that pushes the water over the edge of the platform on the south side and into the sea. So I'm looking at this and it's hard to figure out what exactly is going on over the edge of the platform. Like, what platform is it referring to get into the sea? If it can push it sort of out of this room and onto the beach and into the ocean, does that imply that this area is open to the sky? If that's the case, it's not really clear from the room description. And also over here, we have this area that's called the baths, and it says that water passes through the floor of the baths through a drain, but the drain seems to be in a different room. Is it saying that the water flows from here all the way through here? But then why is only this room illustrated with water and not this one? And also, is this a sideways view where this is like how deep the water is, or we're looking at it from the top? There's a lot of just sort of iconography used to make the map more stylized, but it doesn't really help me understand exactly how things are laid out. And that's something that bugs me in particular when I run adventures, because my players ask questions. Where exactly is everything? How is things laid out? And I would have a hard time answering. Now, the last major section is the Tree of Life, which is this dungeon area that is underneath the town. And as you can see, it is designed like the Sephiroth, I think I'm saying that correctly, which is a part of Jewish mysticism, which I don't really understand because I've not studied that, so I don't want to butcher it. But I've definitely seen this configuration before. So it's kind of neat that that's been configured into a dungeon design. Each of the rooms comes with a little mini map on the side with the exact area highlighted, which I like. And what I also like is that not only are all the rooms described, but each of the corridors gets its own description. I feel like that's something that a lot of dungeon designs could make use of, because those corridors are often neglected. You can put a lot of fun things and flavor inside those. There's just some fun encounters in here. Like in the very beginning room, there is a kind of holographic projection where you have this circular room with all of these mirrors, and you have an object hidden high above, and it's being projected down into the center of the room like a hologram, which is just interesting in and of itself. But that also makes you think, what else could we put up there at the top of the room to create a holographic projection? Players are sure to get creative with that. Some really powerful magic items like the Doo-Dah, an inert humanoid root, splash a bit of milk to wake it, and it doubles in size each time. Hold on tight, then imagine a place you'd rather be, it'll take you there. So that's super useful, teleport around a world really. But because of the restriction, it doubles in size each time. Quickly it's going to become so massive that you're not going to be able to move it at all. I think that's a really fun restriction, though it would be nice to actually have details on, how big is it going to get? How much does it weigh? Or some sort of criteria to figure out at what point is it not going to be possible for one person to move it anymore? Because that is the real restriction on it. Here's another weird creature, the Dazzler, another great source of information because he can tell you anything that you want to know about the Tree of Life. That's great because that gives players information they can use to actually proceed intelligently through the dungeon. It says that he is immune to most weapons, which is probably why he doesn't have a stat line, I would guess. But still, information about what he would do if he attacks you might be good to know, because that might still happen. You can defeat him, though, if you find his name slip, which is hidden in the dungeon, which has his name written backwards on it. If you say that out loud, then you banish him. In the hospice, you can find the Golem itself, which is still bound, and you can find the Book of the Night Wanderer, which is a book for summoning angels. We'll see that later. That's a really cool magic item where you could get into some serious trouble with it. In the engine room, near the end of the dungeon, there is a huge sculpture, a terrifying creature with 6 wings centered around a wizened face. A piece of paper is stuffed in its mouth. When the paper is removed, it crumbles to dust as the sculpture comes alive, screaming, "Holy, holy, holy." Anyone in earshot must save Will or fall unconscious. In the pit, which is 2 feet wide, gazing inside reveals a palace, bright lights and chariots of fire ridden by strange, shining creatures. Alien voices sing a song, the words too faint to hear. That's a really nice element of wonder to throw in there. Players want to look into the pit, here's what they see. They see like a whole other universe that they probably don't have access to. But it does make the game world feel bigger and more mysterious. In the throne room at the very end of the dungeon is where the Aluka is hiding. Normally it looks like this evil old woman with tons of teeth going all the way down her throat, but she has taken the form of a child to try and query the PCs for information about methods of escape or to try and trick them into helping her escape, right? Classic evil villain trick. And in the very center of the room is a triangle drawn on the floor that is the gate to the Yene Veld. So hopefully by this point in the adventure, you know what that is and you're not going to walk right into it. Because if you do, you immediately get turned to ash and transported there permanently. So here's the Book of the Night Wanderer. It has a whole bunch of angels that you can summon. Normally it's only used once, and it will disappear unless magically bound to this realm by a skilled practitioner. So find a good magic user, have it bound to this realm, whatever ritual that involves, and now you can summon angels whenever you want. But of course, there is always a price to be paid. So the blessing is usable once per day, but it always demands a toll, which is immediate and perpetual. So for example, if you try and summon Metatron, you get a middle-aged man sitting on a throne, his eyes made of flaming torches. His voice is awesome and imbued with authority and wisdom. You cannot be found if you do not wish it, or you can know the location of a single creature. But you become face blind even for people in your memories. Or you might summon the angel Michael, clothed in robes of gold covered in arcane symbols. Their voice is clear and articulate. You are shielded from any magical harm. I assume that means for one day, not permanently. But your head is weighed down as if it carries a crown. Helmets and hats cause you great suffering, so you can wear less armor. Now, I did notice that some of the penalties seem to be a lot worse than others. So for example, not being able to wear a helmet, that's something you really have to take into account. But for example, the penalty for this one is that the world becomes muted. Colors, tastes, and sounds are less vibrant. You can no longer see the stars. Now, that is a pretty interesting penalty in terms of role-playing, but it's probably not going to have that much impact on the game. And what happens if you actually find a way to bind this book to our world so it doesn't disappear, like it said? If that was the case, what happens if you just keep using the same angel summoning over and over again? It doesn't seem like in many of these cases, the penalty would really stack, but you would still keep getting the benefit. I mean, I can just think of different ways for players to try and abuse this. And of course, a good game master would find a way around that. Or you would just create rulings where you can't bind it to this world. It can only work one time ever. That's probably the best solution. At the back of the book, there is a glossary of many of the terms that you might not be familiar with, which is really useful if you need to look those up. And there's some further reading on folktales and stories and the Jews themselves and the Kabbalah, mysticism, and Judaism. So that's it for Beyond the Pale. It was a really interesting adventure to read. I had a lot of fun, a lot of very vibrant imagery, a lot of great characters, a lot of very juicy flavor all throughout the adventure. It's definitely designed for a group that wants more investigation rather than a combat-focused adventure. Although, as I pointed out, there are some areas where I think more information could be given to help out the game master. You know, it's funny, when I review these books, I often advocate for a more terse style of writing because oftentimes the problem is in the opposite direction, where you have books with these giant walls of text. But in some cases, I think it's a little bit too terse, and some more information would be very helpful. But overall, a really interesting adventure, especially if you have a campaign that is set in the real world or something very similar to our world, where you can have Jewish mysticism plugged into it and it won't feel out of place. As usual, if you want to pick up this book, I'll have links to where you can pick it up in PDF or in print form down in the description below. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.